They told you being alone was punishment. They lied. What if the very thing you've been running from, the isolation, the empty rooms, the silence that follows you like a shadow, is not your curse, but your forge? What if loneliness is not a wound to heal, but a weapon you were never taught to wield? Niccolò Machiavelli watched men rise and fall for decades in Renaissance Italy. He studied princes who commanded armies and merchants who built empires. And he noticed something that nobody talks about. The men who held power the longest were not the ones surrounded by allies. They were the ones who understood how to be alone without being destroyed by it. There is a reason society wants you plugged into the hive. There is a reason you are told that isolation is dangerous, that you need community, that you need validation, that you need to belong, because a person who can stand alone cannot be controlled. Today, I am going to show you what Machiavelli Schopenhauer, how and Nietzsche understood about solitude, truths so threatening they have been buried beneath centuries of social conditioning. You will learn why the crowd fears the individual who walks alone. You will understand the strategic architecture of isolation. And by the end, you will see your loneliness not as a deficit, but as an advantage so profound that most people will never be psychologically equipped to access it. But this knowledge comes with a cost. Once you understand what I'm about to reveal, you cannot return to the comfortable lie that connection is always good and solitude is always bad. Let's begin. In Law 18 of the 48 Laws of Power, Robert Greene presents one of the most counterintuitive principles ever written. Do not build fortresses to protect yourself. Isolation is dangerous. On the surface, this seems to contradict everything I just said, but look closer. Greene is not warning against solitude. He is warning against fear-based isolation, the fortress built from weakness, not strength. There is a distinction that separates kings from cowards, strategic withdrawal versus frightened retreat. When a prince builds walls because he fears his enemies, those walls become his coffin. History is littered with examples. Louis XVI retreated into Versailles while France starved. He surrounded himself with sycophants. He cut himself off from the reality of his kingdom. And when the mob finally came, those gilded walls could not save him. But there is another kind of isolation, the kind practiced by Marcus Aurelius, who wrote his meditations alone in a military tent, surrounded by war and death. The kind practiced by Niccolò Machiavelli himself, who wrote The Prince in Exile, banished from Florence, tortured by the Medi, stripped of everything he built. He was not hiding from the world. He was distilling everything he knew into a weapon. Machiavelli wrote from isolation, but not from fear. He wrote from fury, from clarity, from a position where he had nothing left to lose, and therefore nothing left to distort his perception. That is the difference. The weak man builds a fortress to escape the world. The strong man builds a laboratory to understand it. Ask yourself, which one are you building? You have been conditioned since birth to fear aloneliness. Think about it. Every children's story punishes the loner. The wolf is solitary and therefore evil. The sheep who strays from the flock gets eaten. The hero is always surrounded by friends, allies, a fellowship. Isolation is presented as the fate of villains and the damaged. This is not accidental. Societies run on compliance. Economies run on consumption. Both require you to care deeply about what others think. Both require you to seek external validation. Both require you to be terrified of standing outside the group. If you are comfortable alone, you stop buying things to impress people. You stop performing for approval. You stop being a useful cog in the machine of endless commerce and endless comparison. Arthur Schopenhauer, the 19th century German philosopher, saw through this centuries ago. He wrote that the person who genuinely enjoys solitude possesses something rare, a self that is sufficient unto itself. But society cannot have that. A self-sufficient individual is an economic liability, an emotional anomaly, a threat to the system of manufactured need that keeps people perpetually hungry for what others provide. So they pathize you. They call it social anxiety. They call it attachment issues. They call it avoidant personality. They invent clinical labels for what might simply be a mind that does not require constant stimulation from the herd. I am not dismissing genuine psychological suffering, but I am asking you to question whether some of your loneliness is real pain or manufactured shame. The question is not why am I alone? The question is who profits when I believe being alone is wrong. Here is what the strategists understood that common people never will. Solitude is the birthplace of original thought. Nietzsche climbed into the Swiss Alps alone. He walked for hours in silence, his mind combusting with ideas that would reshape philosophy. Thus Spoke Zarathustra was not written in a salon surrounded by intellectuals. It was written in isolation so profound that most people would have collapsed into madness. But Nietzsche did not collapse. He transcended. He wrote, "The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly." This is not arrogance. It is observation. When you begin to think original thoughts, thoughts not borrowed from the group, not validated by consensus, you become invisible to those who can only see through collective eyes. And this is your advantage. When you spend time alone, genuinely alone without the crutch of distraction, something begins to happen. Your mind stops echoing the opinions of others. Your thoughts stop being reflexive reactions to the noise. You start to hear your own voice, perhaps for the first time since childhood. Anthony Storr, in his study of creative genius, documented this phenomenon repeatedly. Newton, alone in quarantine inventing calculus. Darwin, alone on his estate for decades developing the theory of evolution. KFK, alone in his room at night producing literature that would haunt the 20th century. They did not create despite their solitude. They created because of it. The crowd produces nothing original. The crowd consumes. The crowd reacts. The crowd borrows and repeats and dilutes. Creation is a solitary act. If you are alone right now, you are in the position of the artist before the canvas. The question is whether you will use that canvas or continue mourning the absence of an audience that would only distract you from your work. Machiavelli observed a specific type of prince who always failed, the one who needed too many allies. A prince who cannot stand alone becomes a hostage to those he depends on. His alliances are not choices. They are necessities, and everyone around him knows it. When people sense that you need them, something shifts in the power dynamic. They begin to take liberties. They begin to test boundaries. They begin to treat you as an option rather than a priority because they know you cannot walk away. This applies to friendships, to romantic relationships, to business partnerships. The person who is terrified of being alone will tolerate disrespect they should never accept. They will stay in relationships that poison them. They will maintain friendships with people who barely hide their contempt. They will agree to bad deals, laugh at jokes that insult them, and bend their identity into shapes designed to please whoever is in front of them. All because the alternative, being alone, feels like death. But here is the truth that will liberate you. The ability to be alone is the foundation of every strong connection. When you can walk away, When you genuinely do not need someone, your relationships transform. You stop negotiating from weakness. You stop accepting crumbs. You start relating from wholeness rather than hunger. Paradoxically, this makes people want you more. Annalee Rufus in Party of One, The Loner's Manifesto, describes how those who are comfortable in solitude often attract the deepest connections because they are not grasping. They are not performing, they are simply present, and presence is magnetic. The desperate connector repels. The self-contained individual attracts. This is not a trick. It is not manipulation. It is physics. Neediness is a repulsive force. Self-sufficiency is gravity. Now let us talk strategy. There is a specific technique that Machiavelli would have endorsed. One that few people understand and even fewer have the discipline to execute. It is called the strategic retreat. When you find yourself losing ground in any arena, social, professional, romantic, the amateur doubles down. They chase harder, they talk more, they prove themselves desperately, and they watch their position erode with every grasping move they make. The Machiavellian does the opposite. They withdraw, not with anger, not with announcement, not with drama designed to provoke pursuit. They simply become less available, less visible, less eager. In 1512, when Machiavelli was dismissed from his position and exiled to his farm, he did not beg for reinstatement. He did not flood the Medi with desperate letters. He retreated, he worked, he wrote, and the prince that emerged from that exile would outlive every one of his political enemies. When you retreat strategically, several things happen. First, you reclaim your attention. The energy you were hemorrhaging toward people who did not value you now returns to you. This alone is transformative. Second, you create space for perspective. When you are entangled with people, you cannot see them clearly. Distance provides clarity that proximity prevents. Third, you trigger something ancient in human psychology. People value what becomes scarce. When you withdraw without hostility, without explanation, you force others to confront what they may have taken for granted. But this only works if your retreat is genuine. If you are secretly watching your phone, hoping for their response, you are not retreating. You are performing retreat while remaining mentally enslaved. The strategic retreat requires actual internal disengagement. You must genuinely refocus your energy on your own work, your own growth, your own empire. You must become so absorbed in your own development that their absence becomes background noise rather than the main event. This is difficult, but difficulty is the filter that separates those who will use these principles from those who will merely understand them. Arthur Schopenhauer was perhaps the most honest philosopher who ever lived regarding human nature. He observed something that most people spend their entire lives denying. The majority of human social interaction is not connection. It is distraction from the unbearable weight of the self. He wrote that a person's value is revealed by how much they enjoy their own company. Those who cannot bear solitude are running from something inside themselves, and no amount of social activity will fill that void. It can only temporarily obscure it. This is why extroverts often collapse when forced into isolation. They have never developed an interior life. Their sense of self is entirely dependent on external feedback. Remove the feedback and they experience something close to ego death. But those who have cultivated solitude, who have sat with themselves in the dark and survived, possess something rare. They have a self that is not contingent. They have an identity that does not require witnesses. Schopenhauer called this intellectual wealth, the ability to entertain yourself with your own thoughts, the capacity to find endless fascination in your own mind without requiring constant external input. This is not arrogance, it is not antisocial, it is psychological independence, and it terrifies those who do not have it. Because when they look at you, someone who does not need the group, they see a mirror reflecting their own emptiness. They see someone who has escaped a prison they did not even know they were in. Let me tell you something nobody will say to your face. The crowd hates the individual who walks alone, not because you threaten them physically, but because you threaten them existentially. Your solitude is an accusation. Every moment you spend content in your own company is a silent indictment of their desperate social performance. Every time you choose not to attend the party, not to engage in the gossip, not to chase the approval they spend their lives chasing, you expose the possibility that they did not have to live the way they have been living, and that is unforgivable. So they will mock you, they will pathize you, they will call you antisocial, weird, too intense, no fun, difficult. Let them. Nature warned us about the herd mentality. The way the masses enforce conformity not through laws but through social pressure, the raised eyebrow, the whispered judgment, the slow exclusion of anyone who does not comply. But the herd's power only works on those who still want to belong. The moment you genuinely release the need for their acceptance, their weapons become impotent. Their contempt becomes irrelevant. Their judgment becomes what it always was, the frightened bleating of those who cannot imagine existence outside the flock. Susan Carr documented in quiet how introverts have been systematically devalued in Western culture. The extrovert ideal, gregarious, talkative, attention-seeking, has been positioned as health itself. Meanwhile, the contemplative, the reserved, the solitary are treated as broken versions of the correct personality. This is cultural propaganda, not psychological truth. Some of the greatest achievements in human history came from minds that required solitude. Einstein developed relativity alone in a patent office. Wittgenstein retreated to a cabin in Norway. Emily Dickinson barely left her room and produced poetry that would outlast empires. The crowd produces noise. The individual produces legacy. Choose which you want to be. Now we arrive at the core technique, what I call the transmutation. This is the alchemical process of converting the lead of loneliness into the gold of sovereignty. Most people never complete this transformation because they are too busy medicating their solitude with cheap distractions. They scroll, they swipe, they numb. They fill every silent moment with noise because they cannot face what the silence contains. But you are still here, which means you might be ready. The first stage of transmutation is acknowledgement. You must stop pathizing your aloneliness. Stop treating it as a problem to solve or a disease to cure. Your solitude is not a symptom, it is raw material. Every hour you spend alone is an hour uncontaminated by the opinions, expectations, and projections of others. This is extraordinarily rare. Most people leave their entire lives never experiencing a single day of genuine psychological independence. Their thoughts are borrowed, their preferences are manufactured, their identity is a composite of influences they never examined. But you, in your isolation, have access to something they do not, an unmediated relationship with your own mind. The second stage is excavation. In solitude, without the distraction of social performance, you begin to encounter parts of yourself you have been avoiding, fears you suppressed, desires you denied, shadows you pretended did not exist. This is where most people retreat back to the noise. The excavation is painful. You find things buried inside yourself that you do not want to face. But Machiavelli understood that the leader who does not know his own weaknesses will be destroyed by them. Self-knowledge is not optional. It is strategic necessity, and self-knowledge is only available to those willing to sit in the dark long enough to see what is there. The third stage is integration. You take what you discover, the fears, the wounds, the shameful desires, the unacknowledged rage, and you incorporate it into your conscious identity. You stop pretending to be only light. You accept the darkness and therefore gain power over it. Carl Jung called this shadow work, but Machiavelli was practicing it centuries before psychology gave it a name. He integrated the ruthless parts of human nature that polite society pretends do not exist, and because he accepted them, he could wield them rather than being controlled by them. The fourth stage is construction. Having cleared the debris of conditioning, having excavated and integrated your hidden self, you now have something most people never possess. A foundation. From this foundation you can build deliberately, not according to social expectation, not according to peer pressure, not according to what will get the most approval. You build according to your own architecture. This is what it means to become sovereign. A sovereign is not someone who rules others. A sovereign is someone who rules themselves. Their kingdom is internal. Their throne is psychological, and no external circumstance can truly dethrone them, because their power does not depend on external conditions. This is what your solitude can give you if you are willing to take it. Let me show you this transmutation in action through history. In 1302, Dante Alighieri was exiled from Florence, banished under penalty of death if he ever returned. He lost his political position, his property, his home. He wandered Italy for the rest of his life, never seeing his city again. Most men would have been destroyed, but Dante took his exile and transmuted it into something immortal. The Divine Comedy, one of the greatest literary works ever created, was written in that wandering isolation. The journey through hell, purgatory, and paradise was not just allegory. It was autobiography. A man who had lost everything descending through his own darkness and emerging transformed. Dante's exile was not his punishment, it was his liberation. Had he remained in Florence, caught up in political games and social performance, he would have died as a minor politician remembered by no one. His exile freed him from the distractions that would have consumed his genius. Consider also Seneca, the Stoic philosopher and advisor to Emperor Nero. When Nero turned against him and forced him into exile on Corsica, Seneca did not despair. He wrote letters from a Stoic works that would influence philosophy for 200 years. In his letter on solitude, Seneca writes, "Set aside a certain number of days, during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself, the while, is this the condition that I feared?" He was not afraid of isolation. He practiced it deliberately because he understood that dependence on external circumstances, whether social, material, or emotional, was the true prison. One more example. In 1845, Henry David Thoreau retreated to a cabin at Walden Pond. He lived alone for 2 years, deliberately simplifying his existence to discover what was essential. What emerged from that solitude was not just a book. It was a philosophy of resistance. Walden taught generations that the life of quiet desperation lived by most men was optional, that you could step outside the machine, that solitude was not exile, it was emancipation. Thoreau wrote, "I never found the companion that was so companionable as solitude." These men did not suffer from their isolation. They were forged by it. Now, let us speak practically. How do you weaponize your solitude? First, establish productive rituals. The danger of unstructured isolation is that it devolves into rumination. The same dark thoughts circling endlessly with no resolution. This is destructive solitude. Productive solitude requires architecture. Daily rituals that channel your alone time into creation, writing, training, building, studying. Machiavelli in his exile had a specific ritual. He would work his farm during the day, then in the evening he would change into formal clothing, the robes he once wore in political office, and enter his study. There he would engage with the ancient masters, reading and writing as though he was still at the center of power. This ritual was psychological. It maintained his identity as a thinker and strategist, even when circumstances tried to reduce him to a farmer. Your rituals perform the same function. They maintain your identity as someone building toward a larger purpose, even when no one is watching. Second, develop intellectual companionship. You may be alone physically, but you need not be alone intellectually. Books are conversations with the greatest minds who ever lived. When you read Machiavelli, Marcus Aurelius, Schopenhauer, you are in dialogue with intellects that understood what you are experiencing. This is not replacement for human connection. It is a different kind of connection, one that transcends time and space, one that cannot be taken from you regardless of your social circumstances. Build your library deliberately. Choose authors who challenge you. Engage with ideas that force you to think rather than merely consume. Third, create evidence of your progress. The danger of solitude is losing track of your own growth. Without external feedback, you can feel stagnant even when you are advancing. Counter this by creating tangible evidence. Write daily, track your training, document your development. Build a record that you can look back on and see objectively that you are not standing still. This evidence serves another purpose. When you eventually re-enter social spaces, and you will have something to show for your time in the darkness. Not explanations, not excuses, results. Fourth, practice strategic re-emergence. Solitude is a phase, not a permanent state. The monk who retreats to the mountain eventually returns to the valley. When you re-emerge, do so strategically, not desperately seeking connection, but offering something of value. The perspective you gained, the skills you developed, the clarity you cultivated. People will sense that you are different. They will feel the weight you carry. The solitude will have changed your presence in ways you may not fully understand, but they will certainly perceive. Here is what they will never teach you in any self-help book, any therapy session, any social skills course. There are people who are meant to walk alone, not forever, not completely, but essentially. They are not broken. They are not damaged. They are not missing something others have. They are simply built for different conditions. The way some animals thrive in Arctic cold that would kill others. The way some plants grow in desert conditions that would wither a forest tree. Your constitution is different. Your internal wiring is different. And no amount of forcing yourself into the mold of the extroverted, the gregarious, the perpetually social will change that fundamental architecture. Schopenhauer wrote that ordinary people think merely of how they shall spend their time. A person of intellect tries to use it. Perhaps you are not lonely. Perhaps you are simply using your time differently than those who cannot bear to be alone with themselves. This does not mean isolation is always good. There is pathological withdrawal, the fear-based hiding that Machiavelli warned against. But there is also sovereign solitude, the strategic positioning of one who has work to do that the crowd cannot understand and would only interrupt. The question you must answer honestly, which one is yours? If you are hiding from life because you fear rejection, that is a wound to heal. But if you are alone because you have discovered something in that aloneliness that cannot be found in company, then you are not sick. You are awakening, and the world will tell you that you are wrong. The world will tell you that connection is everything and isolation is death. The world will pathize your preference and medicate your solitude. Ignore them. They do not understand what you have access to. They cannot comprehend the forge you are building yourself within. They are speaking from their own terror of silence, a terror you have already begun to overcome. So where does this leave you? You are alone. Perhaps right now, perhaps tonight, perhaps tomorrow. And instead of treating that aloneliness as a problem to escape, you can now see it as a territory to explore, a laboratory to experiment within, a forge to shape yourself. You are not being punished, you are being prepared. The solitude you are experiencing is stripping away everything that was not really you. The false identities, the performed personalities, the borrowed opinions, all of it is being burned away in the fire of your isolation. What remains is essential, and from that essence you will build something that does not require external validation to stand, something that cannot be shaken by rejection or abandonment, something that is yours in a way that nothing connected to the approval of others can ever be. Machiavelli did not write The Prince to be liked. He wrote it to be true, and that truth, unflinching, uncomfortable, eternal, outlasted every prince and politician of his era. Your solitude can produce the same, not a book perhaps, but a self so integrated, so clarified, so deliberately constructed that it does not bend to every social wind. That is the gift hiding inside your loneliness. Take it. There is more I want to show you, layers of this that I cannot reveal here. If this resonated, if something in you recognized these words as something you already knew but had never heard spoken, understand this. What I share publicly is only the surface. There are territories of human psychology I cannot discuss openly. There are strategies of power and self-mastery that would be suppressed, demonetized, buried by those who benefit from keeping you asleep. Those exist behind the join button. If you're still here at the end, you are not like the others who clicked away. Subscribe if you haven't already, but if you want access to what's hidden, click join and enter the architect level. You'll find what I cannot say here, most won't. That's precisely the point. And as you close this video, carry this thought with you. The next time you are alone, truly alone, and that familiar ache begins to rise, stop. Ask yourself, what if this is not my sentence but my preparation? The crowd cannot hear what the silence is teaching you, but you can.